Okay, this question here, we're giving an activity table, a precedence table, and we're asked to draw the activity network described, and we're told here very explicitly, it's quite handy for us to use exactly two dummies. Now I'm going to draw it up here in the right hand corner, a bit messy, and then I'm going to redo it at the bottom neater when I know how it looks. So sometimes with these you have to draw it a couple of times to get it exactly right. So I'm not even going to use a ruler the first instance, but afterwards I'm going to make it neat. So let's think about this. Activities A and B start off and they depend on nothing. So I'm going to start off here at an initial node, which I'm going to call, it doesn't matter what you call it, I'm going to call it 1, let's say, and I'm going to draw out an A and a B coming out of it. Remember, the activity is on the arc. The event is the closure of an activity. Now, C and D both depend on A. So I'm going to close off A and call it number 2, and I'm going to have C and D coming out of it like that. C and D come out like that. Okay, now E depends on B, so I've got to close off. Oh, that should have been a B here. Sorry, that was my mistake. That should have been a B. Now I'm going to close off B. I'm going to say that B is done for number 3, and I'm going to draw E coming out of it. So E is coming out of it like that. Now, F depends on C and D. So F depends on C and D. If I close off C and D here at the same point, I would be starting and finishing at the same point, which I can't do. So what I'm going to, and also look, this is where I know a dummy's coming into play. G depends on D, whereas F depends on C and D. So I've got to be careful here. So I'm going to need a dummy. So let's close off, let's say a C here, close that off with number 4. And we're also going to close off D, maybe number 5, like that. Now G comes out of D, so I'm going to have G coming out like that, and I've done that. But F depends on C and D, okay? So I'm going to draw a dummy going upwards with an arrow, so that if I have, obviously, F coming out of it as follows, then it depends on C and D because of the dummy. So I'm sorted to there. Then I've got H dependent on F and G. So H depends on F and G. Now that's fine, these two can close off at the same place because they didn't start together. So I'm going to draw that coming down here and call that number, am I on 6? And I'm going to have H coming out. That's absolutely fine because they didn't start at the same place. So done. I depends on H and J depends on H. So I can close that off 7 and I could have an I coming out of it and I could have a J coming out of it. Done. And K depends on I and J. So K depends on I and J. Now, obviously, I'm going to have to, if I close these off at the same point, they started together, so that's not good enough. So I'm going to close that off at 8, close it off at 9. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to have a dummy coming down here so that K can depend on I and J. If that's like that, K can depend on I and J like that. Whereas we can just have J depending just on well, just like that, that's fine. Now, E was never closed off, so E and K must end at the same point, which we're going to do is number 10. Now, that got a bit messy here, so let me just redraw that for us down below with nice straight arrows. So I'm going to copy that, and I'm just going to take a bit of time here just to draw that neatly for the examiner. So I'm going to group that, make it a tiny bit smaller over here, and let's draw it neatly. So all in the same colour this time perhaps, so let's do here. So that's number 1. A and B come out of number 1. So A and B, let's get the arrows coming out. A and B come out like that. Okay, then we close off these two here, so that would be 2 and that would be 3 just like we had. Then these two come out here, so that comes out here, that comes out here. We closed these two off, didn't we? So that was 4 and that was 5, so that was 4, 5. Then we had a dotted line coming up, so let's make sure we have a dotted line for the dummy like that. And then we had F and G both ending here, so let's draw a proper line now, F and G both coming in to this point here, which I'll close off as number 6. And then H was fine like that, so H was fine like that. That was number 7. And I and J, well, so I and j came out like that, so I'm just going to have I going up here. I'm going to have j going down here, and close that off to be an 8, close that off to be a 9. Let's put the dummy in between, the dummy with a dotted line down like that. Okay, and then we had k coming out at the end, so I'm going to have k coming out here, and it closed off here with e, just like that. So I closed that off at number 10. Okay, so it's important we put them in. So that was A, that was B, that was C, that was D. This was, I think, F and G. So that was F and that was G, that was H, that was I, that was J, and that was K. And we're done there. So I've drawn it nice and neatly for you to get full marks there in the exam. Okay, so we've got the 5 marks there. And lastly, it says explain why each of the 2 dummies is necessary. Well, this is a perfect question. It comes up a lot. We've just got to learn these. The first dummy comes from this, and all you've got to state is what's going on here. F depends on C and D, whereas G only depends on D. That's all you've got to say for the first reason. So we're going to say that F depends on C and D, whereas G only depends on D. Okay, that's always the first one, and the other one is to do with this here. Now these would have started and finished at the same point were it not for a dummy, and there's a way you have to express that. I and J must be uniquely represented in terms of their events. So you just state for number 2 that I and J must be uniquely represented by their events. And by that, I'm just going to put in brackets, you have to write that line there. Can't start and finish at the same note. Start plus finish at same note. Okay, and that's it for this question. Nice, good 7 marks.